I arrived at the weathered brick warehouse in Toronto, desperate and running out of options. The building sat in an industrial zone that had seen better days, with faded paint on the loading dock and security lights casting harsh shadows across the cracked pavement. My unemployment benefits had run dry 2 weeks ago, and the stack of rejection emails in my inbox grew taller by the day. The evening air felt cool against my face as I double-checked the address on my phone. This place wasn't exactly what I'd pictured when I'd answered the online job listing for night inventory associate, immediate start. But beggars can't be choosers, and Mrs. Morris had made it crystal clear yesterday morning. Pay the back rent by the end of the month, or find somewhere else to live. I pushed through the heavy metal door marked office and stepped into a small reception area with linoleum flooring and fluorescent lights that gave everything a sickly yellow tint. A middle-aged man looked up from a desk cluttered with paperwork. "Aaron Zimmerman?" he asked, rising from his chair. He was shorter than me, with a solid build that spoke of years of physical work. His salt and pepper hair was cut short, and deep lines around his eyes suggested he'd been doing this job for a long time. "That's me," I said, extending my hand. "Thanks for meeting with me, Mr. Diaz." "Russell is fine," he said, his handshake firm but quick. "You're punctual, that's good. Follow me to my office so we can talk." I followed him down a short hallway into a cramped room with filing cabinets lining one wall and a desk piled with inventory sheets and order forms. The computer on his desk looked at least 10 years old. "Have a seat," Russell said, gesturing to a metal folding chair across from his desk. "Your application said you've done warehouse work before?" 3 years at a distribution center in Hamilton, I confirmed. Mostly order picking and inventory management. Russell nodded, seemingly satisfied. "The job here is straightforward. Overnight shift, 10 p.m. to 7 a.m., 5 nights a week. Mainly restocking shelves with automotive parts that come back as returns, doing inventory checks, basic maintenance of the loading dock equipment. We pay $20 an hour, which is above market for the work." The pay caught my attention immediately. $20 an hour would cover my rent and start chipping away at my credit card debt. I leaned forward, trying not to appear too eager. "That sounds perfect," I said. "When would you need me to start?" "Tomorrow night, if possible. Our last night guy left." Russell paused, his expression tightening. "He left suddenly. We need someone reliable right away." "I can definitely start tomorrow," I said. "Is there anything specific I should know about the job?" Russell opened a drawer and pulled out a single sheet of paper. He placed it on the desk and slid it toward me. "These are the rules for the night shift. I need you to read them carefully." I picked up the paper, expecting standard workplace policies about safety procedures or theft prevention. Instead, I found a numbered list that made me blink twice to make sure I was reading it correctly. 1. Do not answer the office phone if it rings after midnight. 2. Do not look at any windows for more than 5 seconds after midnight. 3. If you hear banging from the storage area, investigate within 5 minutes. If you find nothing, exit the building for 10 minutes. 4. If the vending machine in the break room makes unusual noises between 1 a.m. and 1:30 a.m., stay away from the break area until 1:30 a.m. 5. Always knock 3 times before entering the office, even if you know it's empty. 6. Complete all inventory tasks before 5 a.m. I looked up at Russell, waiting for him to crack a smile or tell me this was some kind of initiation joke. His face remained serious. "These are unusual rules," I said carefully. Russell's eyes met mine. "They're necessary for the smooth operation of this facility. Following them is a condition of employment." I read through the list again. None of the rules seemed dangerous, just bizarre. But the $20 an hour kept flashing in my mind, along with Mrs. Morris's stern face when she'd handed me the final notice on my rent. "What happens if the phone rings after midnight?" I asked. "You don't answer it," Russell replied flatly. That's all you need to know." His tone made it clear that further questions about the rules wouldn't be welcome. I folded the paper and tucked it into my pocket. "I can follow these rules," I said. "No problem." Russell's shoulders relaxed slightly. "Good. I'll be here for your first night to show you the ropes. After that, you'll be on your own for most of the shift. I come in at 7 to relieve you and handle the day shift paperwork." He pulled out another form, a standard employment contract, and slid it across the desk along with a pen. I skimmed through it quickly, finding nothing unusual in the legal text, then signed at the bottom. Russell took the contract back and opened another drawer, pulling out a set of keys and a plastic ID badge with the company logo. "This will get you into all the areas you need access to," he said, handing them over. "The main entrance, storage rooms, office. The alarm code is on the back of your badge. You'll need to disarm it when you arrive and set it when you leave." I took the items, feeling the weight of the keys in my palm. "Thanks. I appreciate the opportunity." Russell nodded, but I noticed how his eyes darted away when I mentioned the rules again. His fingers drummed nervously on the desk for a moment before he composed himself. "Just follow the procedures exactly as written," he said. "The job itself isn't complicated. We've had issues with employees who didn't take the rules seriously." The way he said issues made me pause, but I needed this job too badly to start asking questions that might make me seem difficult before I'd even started. "I understand," I said. "I'm good at following instructions. You won't have any problems with me." Russell stood up, signaling the end of our meeting. "Good. Be here tomorrow at 9:30. I'll give you the full tour and training before your first shift officially starts." As I walked back to my car, I pulled out the list of rules again and read through them one more time. The rational part of my brain suggested that maybe this was some elaborate test of how well I followed directions. Or perhaps the building had some quirks, old pipes that made banging noises, a faulty phone system, a temperamental vending machine, and these rules were just practical workarounds. Whatever the explanation, I couldn't afford to be picky. Mrs. Morris had made it clear that her patience had run out, and I needed to pay what I owed or face eviction. $20 an hour for following some odd rules seemed like a fair trade. I started my car and took one last look at the warehouse before pulling away. Its brick facade looked even more worn in the fading evening light, windows like dark eyes watching me leave. I'd be back tomorrow night ready to follow whatever strange rules kept this place running, no questions asked. I arrived at the warehouse for my first shift just before 9:30. The building looked even more run down at night, its weathered brick facade barely visible under the weak glow of a single security light. Russell was waiting for me at the front entrance, keys jangling in his hand. "Right on time. Good." He nodded approvingly as I approached. "Let's get you familiar with everything before I leave you on your own." I followed him inside, where he showed me how to disarm the security system using the code on the back of my ID badge. The alarm panel beeped softly as the red light switched to green. "First thing you'll do each night is check this clipboard." Russell pointed to a metal clipboard hanging near the entrance. "It lists any special tasks for the shift. Most nights, it's just the standard routine, but sometimes we get rush orders that need processing by morning." The warehouse was larger than it appeared from outside, with tall metal shelving units arranged in neat rows throughout the main floor. The concrete floor was worn but clean, marked with faded yellow lines indicating walkways and work zones. "Your main job is restocking returns," Russell explained, leading me to a staging area where several boxes sat on metal tables. "Customers send back parts for all sorts of reasons. Wrong size, change their mind, whatever. You check them against the return slip, make sure they're in sellable condition, then put them back in their proper places." He demonstrated the process with a set of brake pads, checking them against a form before walking me to the appropriate shelf and placing them in their designated spot. Inventory checks are your second priority, he continued, moving to a computer terminal mounted on a rolling cart. The system will tell you which sections need counting each night. Just scan the barcode on the shelf, then count every item and enter the total. Pretty straightforward. I nodded, watching as he navigated through the inventory software. It was an older system, but seemed simple enough. Last major responsibility is maintaining the loading dock equipment. Russell led me to the back of the warehouse where a large rolling door opened onto a concrete loading platform. Check the hydraulic lift daily, make sure the door tracks are clear, and sweep the dock area. Equipment log is kept in this cabinet. He tapped a metal cabinet mounted to the wall. For the next 2 hours, Russell walked me through every corner of the warehouse, showing me where different automotive parts were stored, how to use the inventory scanner, and the proper way to document my work. The layout was logical enough. Smaller parts like filters and spark plugs near the front, larger components like alternators and radiators toward the back, with specialized sections for electrical parts and tools. "Break rooms here," Russell said, opening a door to reveal a small room with a table, chairs, microwave, and the vending machine he'd mentioned. "Fridge works if you bring your own food. Vending machine takes coins or bills, but remember Rule 4. Stay out between 1 and 1:30 if it's making strange noises." I nodded, though I still found that rule particularly strange. As midnight approached, Russell checked his watch. Almost time for me to head out. "Any questions before I leave you on your own?" "I think I've got it," I said, though I wasn't entirely confident. "The return forms go in the completed box after I restock the items, right?" "That's right, and don't forget to log everything in the system." Russell's expression grew more serious. "Most importantly, remember those rules. All 6 of them. Follow them exactly." "I will," I promised, patting my pocket where I'd placed the folded paper with the numbered instructions. Russell walked me back to the front of the warehouse. "I'll be back at 7 to relieve you. If there's an emergency, a real emergency like a fire or break-in, call the number posted by the phone. Otherwise, you should be fine on your own." At exactly midnight, Russell grabbed his jacket and headed for the door. "Good luck on your first night. Remember, follow the rules." With that final reminder, he was gone. The heavy metal door closed behind him with a solid thunk, leaving me alone in the warehouse. I stood there for a moment, listening to the subtle hum of the fluorescent lights overhead and the occasional click of the building settling. The silence was almost oppressive. "Well," I said to myself, "might as well get started." I checked the clipboard Russell had shown me. Tonight's tasks were simple. Restock 3 boxes of returns, conduct inventory on aisles 7 through 9, and sweep the loading dock. I decided to start with the returns. The work was mundane but straightforward. Each return had a form listing what the item was, why it was returned, and where it belonged in the warehouse. I spent the first hour carefully checking spark plugs, oil filters, and timing belts, making sure they matched their descriptions before returning them to their proper places on the shelves. Around 1:15, I remembered Rule 4 about avoiding the break room if the vending machine made unusual noises. I paused, listening carefully, but heard nothing out of the ordinary. Just the normal building sounds, the hum of lights, the occasional click of the heating system cycling on and off. I continued with my inventory checks, methodically scanning shelf barcodes and counting packages of oil filters in aisle 7. The repetitive task was almost meditative, and I found myself relaxing into the routine. The office phone never rang. The vending machine remained silent. There was no mysterious banging from the storage area. By the time I finished sweeping the loading dock around 5 in the morning, I was beginning to wonder if the rules were some kind of elaborate joke for new employees. The rest of my shift passed without incident. I completed all my assigned tasks by 6:30 and spent the remaining time double-checking my work. When Russell arrived at 7, I was ready to go. "How'd it go?" he asked, hanging his jacket on a hook by the door. "Fine," I replied. "Got everything done, no problems." He nodded, seeming unsurprised but somewhat relieved. "Good. See you tonight then." My second night followed much the same pattern. I arrived, disarmed the alarm, and checked the clipboard for my tasks. Russell left at midnight with the same reminder to follow the rules. I worked through my assignments, restocking a different set of returns, conducting inventory on different aisles, and checking the hydraulic lift on the loading dock. Again, nothing unusual happened. The phone didn't ring. The vending machine was quiet. No strange banging sounds echoed through the warehouse. I did feel somewhat foolish when I needed to enter the office to file some paperwork, and stopped to knock 3 times on the door, as per Rule 5. I stood there, knocking on the door of an empty room, feeling ridiculous. But I did it anyway, just as instructed. By my third night, the routine was becoming familiar. I knew where most parts belonged without having to check the location guides. I could navigate the inventory system with ease. The warehouse no longer felt quite so vast and unknown. My fourth night started just like the others. I arrived, Russell gave me my tasks, and at midnight, I was on my own again. As I worked through restocking a box of alternators, I found myself questioning the rules more seriously. 4 nights had passed without a single strange occurrence. The phone never rang after midnight. The vending machine never made unusual noises. There was never any banging from the storage area. I began to suspect that the rules might simply be meaningless quirks, established by some overly cautious former manager. Maybe there had been issues with the phone system in the past, or the vending machine had once malfunctioned. Perhaps the rules had been necessary at some point but were now just outdated protocols that no one had bothered to update. As I checked oil inventory, methodically counting bottles and entering the numbers into the system, I wondered if Russell was just testing my ability to follow instructions, no matter how arbitrary they seemed. Or maybe this was some elaborate hazing ritual for new employees. Whatever the explanation, the work itself was mundane but manageable. The pay was good, and that was what mattered most to me. I needed to make rent and pay down my credit card debt. If following a few strange rules was the price for financial stability, I could live with that. I finished my shift without incident, just as I had the previous 3 nights. As I waited for Russell to arrive and relieve me, I looked around the quiet, ordinary warehouse with its rows of automotive parts and wondered if I'd ever learn the truth behind those 6 rules. I heard the warehouse door close behind Russell as he left for the night. Checking my watch, I saw it was exactly midnight. 5 nights into this job and the routine was becoming familiar. Russell would leave, and I'd spend the next 7 hours alone with rows of automotive parts and a list of mundane tasks. I grabbed the clipboard from its hook near the entrance and scanned tonight's assignments. More returns to restock, inventory checks for aisles 10 through 12, and some organization work in the electrical components section. Nothing I couldn't handle. For the first hour, I worked steadily through a box of brake pads, matching each one against its return slip and placing them in their designated spots on the shelves. The warehouse was quiet except for the hum of the fluorescent lights and the occasional click from the heating system cycling on and off. I'd gotten used to the silence, even found it peaceful compared to my previous warehouse jobs, where forklifts and workers created constant noise. Around 1:15 in the morning, I was kneeling to place the last set of brake pads on a bottom shelf when I heard it. A strange sound coming from the direction of the break room. I froze, listening more carefully. There it was again, a weird mechanical groaning noise, like something was straining or struggling inside the vending machine. Rule 4 immediately came to mind. Avoid the break room during unusual vending machine noises between 1 to 1:30 a.m. I stood up slowly, my heart beating a little faster. For the past 4 nights, nothing unusual had happened. I'd started to think the rules were pointless, maybe leftover protocols from some old building quirk that no longer existed, or just Russell's way of testing how well I followed instructions. But now, hearing that unsettling mechanical groan echoing through the otherwise silent warehouse, I wasn't so sure anymore. I checked my watch again, 1:17 a.m. According to Rule 4, I needed to stay clear of the break room for another 13 minutes. Fine by me. I grabbed my inventory scanner and headed to the opposite end of the warehouse to start on aisles 10 through 12. The further I got from the break room, the fainter the groaning became, though I could still hear it faintly even from across the building. The sound continued intermittently as I scanned packages of oil filters and noted their quantities in the system. I tried to focus on my work but found myself constantly checking my watch, waiting for 1:30 to arrive. At exactly 1:30, the groaning stopped. The sudden silence was almost as unsettling as the noise had been. I waited another 5 minutes before cautiously making my way back toward the break room. Standing in the doorway, I saw everything look normal. The vending machine hummed quietly with its usual operational sound. The fluorescent light above the table flickered slightly as it always did, and the microwave display showed its standard, blinking 12 mias. I approached the vending machine carefully, examining it from all angles. Nothing seemed out of place or damaged. It looked exactly as it had during my previous shifts, just an ordinary, slightly outdated snack dispenser with rows of chips, candy bars, and packaged cookies visible through the glass front. After confirming everything appeared normal, I returned to my work, finishing the brake pad restocking and completing my inventory checks. The rest of the night passed without incident, though I found myself listening more intently to every creak and hum of the building. When Russell arrived at 7 the next morning, I considered mentioning what I'd heard, but decided against it. The rules had worked. I'd avoided the break room during the strange noises, and nothing bad had happened. Maybe that was all there was to it. "How'd it go last night?" Russell asked as he hung his jacket on the hook by the door. "Fine," I replied. "Got everything done on the list." He nodded, seeming satisfied with my brief report. I clocked out and headed home, thinking about the strange incident, but telling myself it was probably just the old machine acting up. Old buildings, old equipment. They make weird noises sometimes. The next night, my 6th shift, I arrived at the usual time. Russell greeted me with a nod, showed me the night's tasks on the clipboard, and left at midnight with his standard reminder to follow the rules. I started by organizing several boxes of spark plugs, arranging them by type and brand on their designated shelves. The warehouse felt different tonight, not quite threatening, but there was a tension in the air I couldn't explain. I found myself moving more quietly, listening more carefully to the building sounds around me. At almost exactly 1:15 a.m., it started again, the vending machine in the break room. But this time the sound was louder, more aggressive. Not just a mechanical groaning, but something that sounded like metal grinding against metal, a harsh scraping noise that echoed throughout the warehouse. I immediately stopped what I was doing, remembering Rule 4. The sound was significantly worse than the previous night, loud enough that I worried something might be seriously malfunctioning. For a brief moment, I considered checking on it, wondering if I should be concerned about an electrical fire or some other safety hazard. But rules were rules, and so far, following them had kept me safe. I deliberately moved to the farthest corner of the warehouse, putting as much distance as possible between myself and the break room. The grinding sound was still audible even there, seeming to reverberate through the metal shelving units. I focused on reorganizing a section of air filters, trying to distract myself from the unsettling noise. Then something new happened. The office phone started ringing. The sudden shrill sound cut through the grinding noise, creating a discordant alarm that made the hair on my arms stand up. Rule 1 flashed in my mind. Don't answer the office phone after midnight. I stood frozen between shelves, listening to the two sounds compete with each other, the grinding metal from the vending machine and the persistent ringing of the phone. The phone rang and rang, its sound echoing throughout the empty building. 1 minute passed, then 2, then 3. I checked my watch repeatedly, counting the minutes, wondering how long it would continue. Almost 5 minutes of continuous ringing passed before it suddenly stopped, cutting off mid-ring. The silence that followed was brief before the grinding from the vending machine resumed, now the only sound in the warehouse. My hands were shaking slightly as I tried to continue with my work. What kind of phone rings for 5 minutes straight? Who would be calling a warehouse at nearly 1:30 in the morning? And what was happening to that vending machine? At exactly 1:30 a.m., just like the night before, the grinding noise stopped. The warehouse returned to its normal quiet state, with only the background hum of the lights and heating system. I waited several minutes before cautiously approaching the break room. Just like the previous night, everything looked completely normal. The vending machine displayed its products as usual, with no sign of the violent grinding noise it had been making minutes earlier. I even pressed my ear against its side, but heard only the standard cooling system hum. Walking to the office, I looked at the phone on the desk. The message light wasn't blinking. There was no indication anyone had called. It sat there innocuously, as if the 5 minutes of incessant ringing had never happened. A chill ran through me as I stood there looking at the ordinary office phone. For the first time, I seriously considered what might be happening in this warehouse at night. The rules weren't meaningless after all. They were warnings. Specific, targeted warnings about phenomena that actually occurred. As I returned to my tasks, I felt increasingly uneasy. The warehouse no longer seemed like a simple storage facility for automotive parts. The shadows between the tall shelves looked deeper, the distant corners darker. Every normal building sound, a pipe expanding, the heating system cycling on, made me tense up. Despite my growing discomfort, I reminded myself why I was here. $20 an hour to follow some strange rules and complete basic warehouse tasks. My landlord needed payment by the end of the month, and my credit card debt wasn't going to pay itself off. I was being paid to follow procedures, not question them. If staying out of the break room during weird vending machine noises and not answering late-night phone calls were part of those procedures, I could handle that. The job was still better than being unemployed. I forced myself to focus on the remaining tasks for the night, methodically scanning inventory and organizing parts. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching me from the shadows between the shelves. Something that knew I was alone in this building. Something that was testing whether I would follow the rules. I heard the banging at 2:15 in the morning. It started as a distant thump that I might have dismissed as the building settling, but quickly developed into a deliberate rhythm. 3 sharp bangs followed by a pause, then 3 more. The sound echoed through the empty warehouse, bouncing off metal shelving and concrete floors. I set down the inventory scanner I'd been using and listened. The banging continued, growing more insistent with each repetition. It was coming from somewhere near the back storage area. Rule 3 flashed through my mind. Investigate storage area, banging within 5 minutes, or exit building for 10 minutes if nothing found. My mouth went dry as I grabbed the heavy-duty flashlight from the utility shelf. This was the first time I'd had to deal with the banging mentioned in the rules. The phone calls and vending machine noises had been unsettling enough, but something about this felt more immediate, more physical. I checked my watch. 2:17 now. I had 3 minutes to start investigating. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead as I made my way down the main aisle, past rows of automotive parts. The banging grew louder with each step I took toward the rear storage section. My footsteps seemed unnaturally loud against the concrete floor, even as I tried to walk quietly. "Hello?" I called out, immediately regretting it. The rules didn't say anything about announcing myself, and something told me I shouldn't be drawing attention. The banging intensified as I approached the storage area. Faster now, more urgent. Bang, bang, bang. Pause. Bang, bang, bang. The rhythm remained the same, but the volume increased until it felt like it was vibrating through my chest. I switched on the flashlight even though the overhead lights were still on. Something about having it in my hand made me feel more secure. The beam cut through the shadows between shelves as I turned the corner into the rear storage section. And then, silence. The banging stopped so abruptly that the sudden absence of sound felt like a physical pressure against my eardrums. I stood frozen, flashlight raised, listening to my own breathing and the distant hum of the building's ventilation system. "Is someone there?" I asked, my voice sounding small in the empty space. No response. I began my search methodically, checking behind each shelf unit. The rear storage area contained larger automotive parts, transmissions, engine blocks, exhaust systems, creating plenty of spaces where someone could hide. I shined my flashlight into every gap and corner, finding nothing but dust and the occasional spider web. After checking the entire storage area, I moved to the loading dock. The large rolling door was securely locked. The hydraulic lift powered down. I tested the side exit door. Still locked from the inside, just as it should be. The equipment log cabinet stood undisturbed, exactly as I'd left it earlier in the shift. Nothing was out of place. No signs of entry, no indication that anyone or anything had been making those sounds. I checked my watch again, 2:23. I'd spent about 6 minutes searching and found absolutely nothing to explain the banging. According to Rule 3, I now needed to leave the building for 10 minutes. I grabbed my jacket from the hook near the front office and headed for the main entrance. The night air hit me with a cold blast as I stepped outside, a sharp contrast to the warehouse's stuffy warmth. I made sure the door locked behind me and walked to my car, parked under one of the lot's few functioning lights. Once inside my car, I started the engine to get some heat going, but kept my eyes fixed on the warehouse. The building looked completely ordinary. Weathered brick, small windows set high on the walls, metal doors. Nothing moved, inside or outside. No lights flickered. No shadowy figures passed by windows. I sat there for exactly 10 minutes, watching the second hand on my watch tick around, half expecting to see something bizarre happen to the building while I waited. But nothing did. It just sat there, looking like any other warehouse in Toronto's industrial district. At 2:34, I turned off my car and headed back inside, disarming and rearming the security system as Russell had taught me. The warehouse interior seemed unchanged. Same fluorescent lighting, same rows of shelves, same quiet hum of equipment. I decided to check the storage area again, just to be sure. Everything remained exactly as I'd left it. No signs of disturbance, no explanation for the banging. With nothing else to do, I figured I'd get back to my inventory tasks. I headed toward the front of the warehouse, planning to grab the scanner I'd left behind. That's when I noticed something strange. The break room door was slightly ajar, though I was certain I hadn't been near it since before 1:30. A faint light spilled from the crack. I approached cautiously, pushing the door open with my foot. The break room looked normal at first glance. Table, chairs, microwave on the counter, fluorescent light buzzing overhead. Then my eyes landed on the vending machine. The retrieval tray at the bottom was open, and inside sat a chocolate bar. I hadn't used the vending machine at all tonight. I hadn't even entered the break room since before 1 o'clock. I moved closer, my steps slow and deliberate. The chocolate bar was a standard brand, nothing special about it except for what appeared to be a small piece of paper wrapped around its middle, secured with a rubber band. My hand trembled slightly as I reached for it. The chocolate was room temperature, as if it had been sitting there for some time. I slipped off the rubber band and unfolded the note. The message was typed in a plain, standard font on ordinary white paper. "Thank you for playing by the rules. Your compliance ensures everyone's safety. Continue following all protocols exactly as written. Management." I read it 3 times, my mouth going dry. The implications hit me all at once. Someone, or something, was watching me. Someone had accessed the vending machine while I was outside. Someone calling themselves management was monitoring my adherence to those 6 rules. But Russell had left at midnight, and I was supposed to be alone until 7 in the morning. The building was locked. The security system was armed. No one else should have been able to enter without setting off alarms. I looked around the break room, suddenly feeling exposed. Were there cameras I hadn't noticed? Was someone hiding somewhere in the warehouse? Or was something more inexplicable happening here? My hands shook as I folded the note and slipped it into my pocket along with the chocolate bar. The weight of it felt like evidence, proof that I wasn't imagining things, that the rules weren't just bizarre protocols but necessary protections against something I didn't understand. I left the break room, making sure to close the door behind me. The warehouse suddenly felt different, not just empty, but occupied in a way I couldn't see. The spaces between shelves seemed darker. The shadows seemed deeper. The ordinary sounds of the building, the hum of lights, the occasional click of the heating system, now carried potential meanings I couldn't decipher. I had more than 4 hours left in my shift, and for the first time since starting this job, I wasn't sure I would make it to morning. I found it impossible to focus during the rest of my shift. Every sound in the warehouse seemed to echo with new meaning. The hum of fluorescent lights, the occasional settling of metal shelves, even my own footsteps bouncing back at me from distant corners. Something was watching me. I couldn't see it, but I felt its attention like a physical weight pressing against my skin. The inventory scanner lay where I'd left it, its small screen still glowing with the last item I'd scanned before the banging started. I picked it up with hands that weren't quite steady, trying to remember where I'd left off. Aisle 11, spark plugs, third shelf. Simple work that now felt impossibly complicated. Metal creaked somewhere in the distance. Normally I'd have written it off as the building settling, but now each sound carried potential meaning. Was that just the ventilation system cycling on, or something else? The normal warehouse sounds I'd grown accustomed to over the past week now seemed deliberately threatening. I tried focusing on the inventory list. Scan barcode, check quantity, enter number, move to next item. Basic work that required minimal thought, which left too much room for my mind to wander to that note. Thank you for playing by the rules. The chocolate bar sat heavy in my pocket, physical proof that someone, or something, had accessed the locked building while I was outside. My eyes drifted toward the windows near the ceiling, dark rectangles against the warehouse walls. I caught myself staring at one and quickly counted 1, 2, 3, 4, then jerked my gaze away before hitting the 5-second mark mentioned in Rule 2. Whatever was out there, I didn't want to invite it in. I moved to the next aisle, scanning items mechanically while constantly fighting the urge to look over my shoulder. The warehouse felt different now. Not just an odd workplace with strange rules, but something actively dangerous. The rows of shelves created long corridors of shadow where anything could hide. Each time I turned a corner, I half expected to find someone standing there. But I was alone. At least, visibly alone. Time crawled. Every glance at my watch showed only minutes had passed when it felt like hours. I kept my head down, focusing on work while staying aware of my surroundings. The note in my pocket felt like it was burning through the fabric. Your compliance ensures everyone's safety. Everyone's. Who else was there to protect besides me? I caught myself looking at another window and quickly counted 1, 2, 3, before forcing my eyes away. What would happen if I stared too long? The rule existed for a reason, and after tonight, I had no interest in finding out what that reason was. The hours until morning stretched endlessly. I completed my tasks with mechanical efficiency, constantly moving, refusing to stay in one spot too long. When the office phone rang again at 4:30, I froze mid-scan, holding my breath until it stopped after the 10th ring. I didn't go near the office. When my watch finally showed 6:45, I gathered my completed paperwork and made sure everything was in order. The sky outside the high windows had lightened to a pre-dawn gray. I stood near the entrance, clipboard in hand, watching the door and waiting for Russell. At exactly 7, the front door opened. Russell walked in wearing the same work jacket he always did, looking tired but unsurprised to see me. He hung his jacket on the hook by the door and nodded at me. "Morning," he said. "Everything go okay?" Instead of giving my usual fine response, I pulled the note from my pocket and held it out to him. Someone left this in the vending machine while I was outside for my 10-minute break. Russell took the paper, unfolding it carefully. His expression changed as he read it. Not surprise, but a deepening concern that made my stomach tighten. He read it twice before looking up at me. "You followed Rule 3, he said. It wasn't a question. "Yes. I heard banging in the storage area, checked it out, found nothing, and went outside for 10 minutes like the rules say." Russell folded the note precisely along its original creases. "Good. That's good." "Who's management?" I asked, pointing at the note in his hand. Russell's mouth tightened into a thin line. He looked at the note again, then at me. "I don't know exactly. I just know they monitor compliance." "Monitor compliance?" I repeated. "Russell, what is this place? What's going on here?" He sighed, rubbing a hand across his face. "Look, Aaron, the employees before you who didn't follow the rules, they didn't just quit." A cold feeling spread through my chest. "What do you mean?" "They disappeared. Completely." Russell's voice was low, almost a whisper. "One guy thought the phone rule was stupid. Answered it after midnight. Never saw him again. His car was still in the parking lot, but he was gone." I stared at him, waiting for the punchline, the admission that this was all some weird joke or test. But Russell's expression remained grave, his eyes tired but serious. "What kind of facility is this?" I asked, my voice sounding strange to my own ears. Russell shrugged, but the gesture seemed forced. "It's just a warehouse. It pays well for basic work. 20 an hour to stock shelves and check inventory. All you have to do is follow the protocols." I studied his face, looking for any sign that this was an elaborate prank, a twitch of the lips, a gleam in the eye that would give him away. There was nothing but exhaustion and grim sincerity. "That's it? Just follow the rules and don't ask questions?" I asked. "That's it," Russell confirmed, handing the note back to me. "You've done good so far. Keep it up." He turned away, effectively ending the conversation. I stood there for a moment, the note in my hand, watching as Russell walked toward his office. He didn't look back. I pocketed the note and gathered my things to leave. Russell had confirmed my worst fears while explaining nothing. People who broke the rules disappeared. The phenomena were real and dangerous. And management, whoever or whatever that was watching my every move. As I pushed open the door to leave, the morning sunlight hit my face, warm and normal. But it did nothing to dispel the cold unease that had settled in my stomach. I had far more questions now than when I'd started my shift, and a growing certainty that I didn't want to know the answers. I continued my shifts with a newfound respect for the rules. After finding that note in the vending machine and hearing Russell's ominous confirmation about disappearing employees, I took every protocol seriously. The warehouse no longer felt like just a job with weird quirks. It was a place where following instructions meant survival. 3 nights after my conversation with Russell, the phone rang at 2 in the morning. I was scanning inventory in aisle 14, far enough from the office that the sound was muffled but still unmistakable. I kept working, counting rings under my breath. 10 rings, then silence. I released the breath I'd been holding and continued scanning brake calipers. The following night, I heard the familiar grinding from the break room at exactly 1:15 a.m. I immediately abandoned my cart of returns and walked to the farthest corner of the warehouse, where I busied myself organizing exhaust components until 1:35 a.m., giving an extra 5 minutes after the sound stopped just to be safe. When I finally checked the break room, I found a pack of peanut butter crackers sitting in the vending machine tray. I hadn't purchased anything. Wrapped around the package was another note. "Your consistency is appreciated. Management." I pocketed both the crackers and the note, adding them to my growing collection of evidence. By the end of my second week, I'd established a routine. I scheduled my tasks strategically, handling inventory in the back sections between 1 and 1:30 to stay far from the break room, positioning myself near the exit after 2 in case the banging started, and avoiding the office area after midnight when the phone might ring. The banging incidents were the most disruptive. They happened roughly twice a week, always after 2 a.m., always requiring me to drop everything and investigate. I never found anything, which meant taking those 10-minute breaks in my car. During one particularly cold night, I sat shivering in the parking lot, watching the warehouse through frosted windows. Nothing moved inside or outside the building. When I returned, a chocolate bar waited in the vending machine with the now familiar note. "Do they want something from me?" I asked my empty apartment one morning after a shift, spreading the 5 notes I'd collected across my kitchen table. Each one thanked me for compliance in slightly different wording, but offered no explanation. I'd started sleeping with them under my pillow, as if they were some kind of protective talisman. The irony wasn't lost on me, seeking protection from the very thing that threatened me. I never saw who or what left the notes. The security system remained armed whenever I took my mandatory breaks outside. The cameras in the corners of the warehouse, which Russell had casually mentioned were non-functional during my training, showed no blinking lights or signs of operation. Yet somehow, management knew my every move. During my 4th week, all 3 phenomena occurred in a single night. The vending machine started at 1:05 a.m. earlier than usual. The phone rang at 2:20 a.m. just after I'd resumed work following the vending machine's quiet period. And at 4:15 a.m. the banging began in the storage area. I followed each protocol exactly, avoided the break room, let the phone ring unanswered, investigated the storage area, found nothing, and took my 10-minute break outside. When I returned, a small feast awaited me in the vending machine tray. 2 chocolate bars, a bag of chips, and a candy bar I'd never seen the machine stock before. The note read, "Exceptional performance under pressure. Your dedication ensures mutual safety. Management." I developed a theory that the incidents were tests, deliberate challenges to see if I would break under stress or maintain compliance. The timing seemed too perfect, the escalation too calculated. But who was testing me, and why? Russell clearly knew more than he shared, but our morning interactions had become increasingly brief. He asked if everything went okay. I said yes, and we both pretended the warehouse was a normal workplace. By my 6th week, I'd mapped the patterns completely. The vending machine only made noise between 1 and 1:30 a.m., never a minute before or after. The phone only rang after midnight, usually between 2 and 5 a.m. The banging always stopped when I investigated, regardless of how long I spent searching. I started keeping a small notebook in my pocket, documenting each incident with timestamps. The data revealed no obvious pattern to when events occurred, but absolute consistency in their duration and response to my actions. The vending machine always quieted at exactly 1:30. The phone always rang exactly 10 times if unanswered. The banging always stopped when I entered the storage area. I created a system to minimize disruption. I did the most concentration-intensive tasks before 1 a.m. when the warehouse remained relatively peaceful. I kept my jacket and keys ready for quick exit if banging started. I planned bathroom breaks and meals around the vending machine's active period. Some nights passed without incident. Others featured all 3 phenomena in seemingly random order. The only constant was that when I followed the rules, I remained safe. "Morning. Everything go okay?" Russell asked at the end of a particularly active night, 7 weeks into my employment. "Fine," I answered, my standard response. He nodded, hanging his jacket on the hook. "You've lasted longer than most." It was the first time he'd volunteered information beyond basic pleasantries since our conversation about disappeared employees. "How long did the previous person last?" I asked. Russell's eyes flicked to the office door. 3 weeks, answered the phone. I wanted to ask more, but Russell had already turned away, signaling the end of our conversation. That night at home, I counted my pay stubs. The job had already helped me catch up on rent and make a dent in my credit card debt. Mrs. Morris had stopped giving me those pitying looks in the hallway. For $20 an hour, I could handle some unexplained phenomena and cryptic notes. During week 8, I found myself almost comfortable with the routine. The incidents had become just another workplace hazard to manage, like slippery floors or heavy lifting. I knew exactly what to do when the phone rang or the vending machine groaned. I kept my flashlight ready for storage area investigations. The notes continued appearing, always after I followed protocol correctly. Sometimes they contained only a single word, perfect. Other times, longer messages. Your consistent adherence to protocol maintains the balance. We appreciate your service. Management. I never learned who or what caused the phenomena. I never discovered the identity of management or how they accessed the vending machine during my breaks. I never understood why the phone rang or what might happen if I answered it. But I created a system that worked. I followed the rules. I completed my tasks. I survived each shift. And somewhere between the fear and the mystery, I found a strange kind of stability. A job with clear expectations and consistent pay, even if those expectations included avoiding supernatural phone calls and mysterious banging sounds. $20 an hour to follow 6 simple rules. As long as I maintained my system and respected the protocols, I could work alongside these unexplained events with minimal disruption. It wasn't normal, but it was manageable. And sometimes, that's enough. I knew I'd reached the tipping point when the vending machine sounds changed. It wasn't the usual grinding or mechanical groaning I'd grown accustomed to over the past 2 months. This was different. Softer, but somehow more intrusive. What had started as a low hum gradually transformed into what sounded like whispers, faint but unmistakable, like several people talking just below the threshold of comprehension. I froze mid-scan, the inventory device still beeping in my hand. The whispers seemed to rise and fall in pitch, almost like a conversation happening behind a closed door. I strained to make out words, but couldn't distinguish anything specific, just the unmistakable cadence of human speech coming from a machine that should only produce mechanical sounds. My first instinct was to investigate, to press my ear against the vending machine and try to decipher what was being said. But Rule 4 was clear. Avoid the break room during unusual vending machine noises between 1 and 1:30, and these whispers definitely qualified as unusual. I checked my watch. 1:12 a.m. I had at least 18 more minutes to stay clear of that area. I abandoned my cart of timing belts and walked briskly to the farthest corner of the warehouse, putting as much distance as possible between myself and the break room. The shelves of exhaust components would keep me occupied until the danger period passed. I focused on organizing manifolds by make and model, but found it difficult to concentrate with the knowledge that something was literally whispering from inside our vending machine. The whispers grew louder around 1:20, becoming audible even from my position at the back of the warehouse. I kept glancing at my watch, counting down the minutes until 1:30 when the phenomenon would stop. The consistency was both comforting and disturbing. Whatever caused these events operated on a precise schedule. At 1:25, I nearly dropped a heavy exhaust pipe when the office phone began to ring. The shrill sound cut through the whispers, creating a discordant duet of unnatural sounds. Rule 1. Don't answer the office phone after midnight. Simple enough, except the ringing didn't stop after the usual 10 rings. It kept going and going. I tried to focus on inventory, but the persistent ringing made it nearly impossible to concentrate. I counted rings to distract myself. 53, 54, 55. By the 100th ring, I was seriously questioning my career choices. The $20 per hour that had seemed so attractive now felt insufficient compensation for whatever was happening in this warehouse. The whispers from the vending machine stopped precisely at 1:30, just as they always did. The phone, however, continued ringing. I checked my watch, 1:35 and still going. This was new. In all my weeks here, the phone had never rung for more than a few minutes. I moved to aisle 14 as far from the office as possible and tried to focus on scanning brake calipers. The ringing continued for 20 full minutes before finally stopping mid-ring at 1:50. The sudden silence felt almost as unsettling as the noise. I exhaled slowly, relieved to have some quiet to work in again. But my relief was short-lived. At exactly 2:15, the banging started. Under normal circumstances, I'd hear 3 sharp bangs from the storage area, pause, then repeat. I'd grown accustomed to that pattern. But tonight was different. The bangs came from multiple directions simultaneously, 3 from the storage area, 2 from near the loading dock, and what sounded like a single heavier thud from somewhere near the office. I stood frozen, scanner in hand, trying to process what was happening. Rule 3 required me to investigate storage area banging within 5 minutes, or exit the building for 10 minutes if nothing was found. But the rule didn't specify what to do when the banging came from multiple locations. I decided to follow the protocol as written. Investigate the storage area first, since that was specifically mentioned in the rules. I grabbed my flashlight from the utility shelf and headed toward the back, trying to ignore the continued banging from other areas of the warehouse. The storage area was as empty as always. No signs of disturbance among the transmissions, engine blocks, and exhaust systems. I methodically checked behind each shelf unit, finding nothing out of place. The banging continued around me, seeming to shift locations as I moved through the space. After 6 minutes of fruitless searching, I retrieved my jacket from the hook by the front door and exited the building, making sure the door locked behind me. The night air was cool against my face as I sat in my car under the parking lot light, watching the warehouse. From outside, the building looked completely ordinary. No lights flickering, no movement visible through the high windows, no external indication of the chaos inside. I kept my eyes on my watch, counting down exactly 10 minutes. At 2:34, I re-entered the warehouse, disarmed and rearmed the security system, and did a quick sweep of the storage area. As expected, everything remained unchanged, and the banging had completely stopped. The warehouse was silent again, but the silence felt charged, as if the building itself was holding its breath. I made my way toward the front to continue my inventory work when I noticed the break room door was slightly ajar, light spilling into the hallway. I approached cautiously, pushing the door open with my fingertips. The vending machine retrieval tray was open. Inside sat not 1 but 3 identical chocolate bars, each wrapped with a note secured by a rubber band. I collected them, unwrapping the first note, which read, "Perfect compliance. Management." The second and third contained the exact same message, down to the handwriting. I pocketed all 3 chocolate bars and notes, closed the break room door firmly behind me, and returned to the warehouse floor. 4 more hours until Russell arrived. 4 hours of hypervigilance in a building that seemed increasingly hostile. As I scanned items in aisle 9, I noticed something moving at the edge of my vision, a shadow shifting between shelves. I turned quickly, but saw nothing. A few minutes later, it happened again. Something dark moving just beyond my peripheral vision. I spun around, flashlight raised, but the beam illuminated only empty space between the shelves. The shadows continued to dance at the edges of my awareness throughout the night. Several times I caught myself staring at the high windows, searching for movement. Each time, I counted quickly. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Then forced myself to look away before exceeding the 5-second limit from Rule 2. I developed a system for the remaining hours. Scan an item, check surroundings, move to next item, repeat. The methodical process helped keep my growing panic at bay. I focused on following the rules with absolute precision, understanding now that they weren't arbitrary guidelines, but literal lifelines. By 6:30, I had completed all assigned tasks despite the night's disruptions. I positioned myself near the entrance, clipboard in hand, waiting for Russell's arrival. The shadows had stopped moving about an hour earlier, but I still felt watched from every corner of the warehouse. When Russell walked in at 7 o'clock, I nearly collapsed with relief. Another night survived. I'd faced all three phenomena at their worst, plus the new shadow movements, and made it through by following every rule precisely. "Morning," Russell said, hanging his jacket on the hook. "Everything go okay?" I nodded, not trusting my voice to remain steady if I tried to speak about what had happened. Some things were better left unsaid, especially to a man who had made it clear he wouldn't, or couldn't, provide real answers. As I walked to my car, the 3 chocolate bars and their identical notes weighed heavy in my pocket, physical proof that something was testing me, watching me, evaluating my compliance. And for now at least, I was passing. I finally reached my breaking point after 3 months working at the warehouse. Not because things had gotten worse. They hadn't. The job had given me exactly what I needed. Enough money to clear my debts and secure a better apartment across town. The weird noises, mysterious notes, and shadowy movements between shelves had become as routine as scanning inventory or restocking brake pads. My last paycheck had pushed my savings over the threshold I'd set for myself. Rent paid 2 months in advance on the new place. Credit cards zeroed out. Even had enough left over for some decent furniture that wasn't salvaged from someone else's curb. Mrs. Morris had stopped giving me those looks of pity when I passed her in the hallway, replaced with simple nods of acknowledgement when I handed over my rent check early. The warehouse job had been perfect in its own twisted way. $20 an hour to follow 6 strange rules and complete basic tasks. The rules themselves had become second nature. Don't answer the office phone after midnight. Don't look at windows more than 5 seconds after midnight. Investigate storage area banging within 5 minutes, or leave the building for 10 minutes if nothing found. Avoid the break room during unusual vending machine noises between 1 and 1:30. Always knock 3 times before entering the office, and complete inventory tasks before 5 in the morning. I survived by following those rules to the letter, never asking questions beyond what I absolutely needed to know, accepting that certain mysteries were better left unexplored. Who or what was management? How did they access the vending machine during my 10-minute breaks? What happened to employees who broke the rules? These questions lingered in my mind, but I'd learned to push them aside. When I walked into Russell's office that morning after my shift, my resignation letter was folded neatly in my pocket. Russell looked up from his computer, salt and pepper hair slightly more salt than when I'd started. "Morning," he said, with his usual nod. "Everything go okay?" "Fine," I replied, the same answer I'd given every morning for 3 months. Then I pulled out the folded paper and placed it on his desk. "I'm giving my 2 weeks' notice." Russell picked up the letter, unfolded it, and read the few sentences I'd typed. His expression shifted from neutral to something I couldn't quite read, relief mixed with concern. "You lasted longer than I expected," he said, refolding the letter along its creases. "Most don't make it past the first month." "The rules weren't that hard to follow," I said with a shrug. Russell looked at me for a long moment, his eyes narrowing slightly. "You never asked what happened to the ones who didn't follow them." It wasn't a question, but I felt compelled to respond anyway. I figured it was better not to know. "Smart," Russell nodded, tapping my resignation letter against his desk. "You find something else?" "Yeah, office job, regular hours." "Good." He placed my letter in a folder and looked directly at me. "Listen, Aaron, this is important. Never discuss anything about this warehouse. Not the rules, not the noises, not the notes. Nothing." The seriousness in his tone made me shift uncomfortably. "Why not?" "Because some things follow you home," Russell said, his voice dropping to just above a whisper. "The rules have been protecting you, even when you're not here." A chill ran through me. For 3 months, I'd convinced myself that whatever strangeness existed in the warehouse stayed within its walls. The thought that it might have followed me home, might have been watching me even as I slept, made my skin crawl. "What exactly is this place?" I asked. The question I should have asked 3 months ago. Russell shook his head. "Just a warehouse. That pays $20 an hour for basic work. That's all you need to know, and all you should ever tell anyone who asks." He stood up, signaling the end of our conversation. "I'll process your paperwork. 2 weeks from today will be your last shift." The following 2 weeks passed without incident. The phone rang at its usual times. The vending machine made its usual noises. The banging in the storage area followed its usual pattern. I followed the rules as meticulously as I had since my first day, perhaps even more so now that I knew the finish line was in sight. On my final night, I completed my tasks early. The warehouse felt different somehow, as if it knew I was leaving. The shadows between shelves seemed deeper, the fluorescent lights dimmer. I found myself counting out loud when looking at the windows, making sure I never exceeded the 5-second limit. At 6:30, with all my work finished, I headed to the break room for a final coffee. The vending machine hummed quietly, displaying its rows of snacks. I hadn't taken anything from it since my first few weeks, when the notes from management had been frequent rewards for following the rules. As I turned to leave, the vending machine made a soft click. The retrieval tray opened, revealing a single chocolate bar wrapped with a folded note. I hesitated before taking it, then unwrapped the note. "Thank you for your service, Aaron. Your compliance has been exemplary. Remember that the rules have been protecting you even outside these walls. Some things notice when patterns change." Management. I read the note twice, then folded it and placed it in my pocket along with the chocolate bar. The implications were clear. Whatever supernatural forces existed in this warehouse had been aware of me beyond my shifts. Had they watched me in my apartment, followed me to the grocery store, been present during my most private moments? At 7 o'clock, Russell arrived for his shift. He hung his jacket on the hook by the door and nodded to me. "Everything go okay?" he asked for the last time. "Fine," I answered automatically, then added, "I got another note." Russell nodded as if he expected this. "Management likes to say goodbye." I wanted to press him for more information, to demand answers to the questions that had built up over 3 months. But I knew he wouldn't tell me anything more than he already had. Some mysteries were better left unexplored. I gathered my things, took one last look around the warehouse with its rows of automotive parts, and walked out the door. The morning sun felt especially bright after 7 hours under fluorescent lighting. I got into my car, placed the note and chocolate bar in the glove compartment with the others I'd collected, and drove away. As I pulled onto the main road, I felt a weight lifting from my shoulders. In 3 days, I would start my new job. A normal office position with regular hours where the strangest workplace rule might be proper coffee pot etiquette. No mysterious phone calls, no banging in storage areas, no notes from an unseen management. I glanced in my rearview mirror at the warehouse growing smaller in the distance. For 3 months, I'd traded my peace of mind for financial stability. Now I had both. Whatever secrets that building held would remain there, and I was perfectly fine with that.